What's up, guys? Veteran Hunter here. So now that Rajang is in World, I've noticed a lot of people, a lot of new players, talk about how hard Rajang is and how he's lived up to his reputation. But I have to disagree. Rajang was never hard. You see, Rajang was always a little bitch. But he's just been around for so long and hunted for so long that he gained a reputation. But even then, you fivers can't even begin to comprehend the cultural and the historical impact that Rajang has had on Moss Hunter. So let me tell you a story. A story about a monkey so angry, so full of rage that oh shit, what the hell is going on? Be fun. You know what, guys? Why don't we reschedule that story if you don't mind? James, dude, you're not a little bitch. Sorry. I'm talking shit. Fuck. Rajang has been around for a long time, and he's gotten a pretty infamous reputation. Some of us know him from this, and now from this. But regardless of when and where you fought him, his fight has probably stuck with you. Why? Because this guy is hype as fuck. This guy just goes apeshit, pun intended. And you can't deny that his fight is super hype. And the common denominator here is that at some point, we've all gotten our asses handed to us by Rajang. And now, it can happen in HD. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think we were gonna get him in Iceborne. But here he is. And how's the reception? Mixed. And it makes sense, cause there's always been mixed feelings about Rajang amongst players in the past, so this isn't out of the ordinary. But things are a little different this time. So I want to analyze old Rajang, Iceborne's Rajang, why his fight is so polarizing amongst players, and talk about why people may feel the way they feel about the fight now. Let's rewind it a bit. Rajang has always been a tough monster throughout all his iterations. As I mentioned, some of us have a particularly vivid memory from the quest of Final Invitation, which was 2 back-to-back Rajangs in the arena. But where I believe Rajang garnered his infamous reputation the most was in 4 Ultimate, most notably because of Apex Rajang, which I'll talk about more soon. But between all pre-Iceborne iterations of Rajang, what was causing the rift between players and his fight? It was whether you knew his fight or not. Now, am I saying that if you didn't like the Rajang fight, you were just bad? No, of course not. That's silly. But what I'm trying to say is that there is definitely a big correlation between knowledge of his fight and how much you enjoyed it. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about this more in detail right now, plus connect it as to why it plays into mixed feelings about Iceborne Rajang. Rajang has always had some bullshit aspects to him, but there was a method to his madness. Just as equally as he could punish you for a mistake, you could reciprocate that just as well if you knew the openings and when and where to punish. Even as someone who finds speedrunning stressful, I ended up speedrunning Rajang several times and even made a guide for him. With practice, this fight would go from horrible to one I really enjoyed and was happy to revisit. But why? Because, even while not perfectly done, Rajang exemplifies the message of Moss Hunter and one of the deeply addicting and core aspects of the game. Encountering this extremely tough and daunting obstacle, but then feeling incredibly rewarded when we can finally overcome it. I know many players who love Rajang now who did not always love him, but once they were able to learn him and overcome him, gained a sense of triumph that you don't always feel with all the monsters. There's something specifically rewarding about being able to take down a Rajang, unlike some other monsters. When it came to fighting him, you really felt the payoff for learning his moves. You felt like you actually got something out of paying attention to what he was doing and learning how to retaliate. And a huge reason for this was Rajang's many punishable openings. One wrong mistake against old Rajang and he would destroy you, sometimes in one hit. But after many of his moves, there were these openings that you had just enough time to get in some damage before you had to get to safety or move out of the way. It was like this primal dance, almost like a really fast turn-based game where Rajang does something, you dodge it or counter it, and then you do something. I'll give you guys some examples. If you're able to evade the Blanca Ball attacks, then you have a punish lined up for you right there. There's a big opening after a failed pin animation, so you can get in a lot of damage if you dodge it or counter it. The beam is a free attack as well. If you know the spacing, you can punish the spin punch. And you're able to snipe him after the Kelby hop into back hop. And after you learn these openings, the fight becomes a lot less stressful and more fun. And not only that, as I mentioned before, you feel rewarded for learning these openings because you're able to see the difference it makes in your hunt, and you feel a lot more confident going in. Now, try to keep some of these openings I just mentioned in mind for when I talk about Iceborne Rajang, and you'll see why. Apex Rajang was everything that Rajang had to offer, dialed up to over 9,000. You had to deal with him with Y-Stones, and it gave him one of the most memorable moves to date. But even then, if you knew the openings, you were still able to make quick work of him, and in general, J-Rank Rajang became one of the funnest fights to do solo. The ability to effectively punish him once you had the knowledge to do so, coupled with the fact that he actually had good hit zones, his whole damn body, made him a fan favorite for many players. Now, there are definitely several reasons to dislike old Rajang. His fight did become a bit chaotic in multiplayer, which was to be expected for a monster with that moveset, and it would be harder to take advantage of some of the openings with him having multiple targets. You obviously still had to worry about his anchor arms getting in the way, or getting you killed if he bounced at the worst time. And then there was the obscene amount of chip damage he did with all of his hops and jumps. But that's pretty much it. I'm sure there are other players out there who have many more complaints about old Rajang, but he always felt like a good challenge and a nice way to test your skill as a hunter. Watch some old videos or talk to some older players, and you'll quickly see why this guy had so many fans, and why we were all hype, but also kinda worried to see him as the first DLC. I hope I gave you a good idea as to why players liked Rajang so much, even despite his reputation in the older games. But now let's dive into Iceborne and talk about its iteration of Rajang. Do people like him? Sort of. A lot of the old aspects of Rajang are still there, and those aspects are the ones that most players seem to like. But unfortunately, there are some new things which seem to hinder his fight a bit. Why can't you clutch claw his head? Why you gotta do that? Also, let's just talk about the clutch claw and Rajang and why this is a match made in hell. The clutch claw, which is a massively impactful aspect of hunts in Iceborne, does not lend itself well to the Rajang fight, and this is especially detrimental because his hit zones suck. Let's reel it back a bit and talk about that, the hit zones. Something I was discussing with a lot of other hunters was that many of the weak spots in World got streamlined to being just the head and maybe one other part, like the front claws or the tail. Even monsters that used to have back leg weaknesses no longer have them. This does change the dynamic of some of the fights, but for the most part, it's not the biggest deal. But for Rajang, it's a bit unfortunate. You see, he still has his head weak spot, and the arms aren't really weak spots, but they can at least be tenderized. But the back legs and torso are no longer weak spots, which is rough once Rajang goes into rampaging mode. Once his arms are hardened, you have to be very careful with how you position yourself. You're still able to hit the head pretty well, but just because of how the Rajang fight goes, you're not always going to be able to chill right in front of him, which means you're often at his side or behind him. Unfortunately, this doesn't fly as much in Iceborne because his legs just don't take any damage anymore. But no big deal. We can still use good positioning and a lot of the openings he leaves to get punishes on his head and his arms, and we can use the clutch claw as much as we need to keep everything tenderized. No. Rajang has no chill. This guy's like young Link in Smash. He has barely any end lag after most of his moves. He still has a couple of pauses here and there, but not nearly as long as they used to be, and a lot of the other openings and pauses he used to have are just gone. And he pretty much just does everything faster. Even things that used to be super free like the beam aren't even that free. He also has this new quick jab that he can just do after every move that'll knock you over if you don't have flinch free. Rajang did not need a quick combo breaker move, and this is just my opinion. These kind of moves are just, they're not very good. They almost just like don't go with the game. He can do this quick jab into pretty much any other move. His Dempsey roll, his beam even, and you can get clapped really easily because of this. And often you end up trading, which against Rajang's damage is never really a good thing. And most of this is chalked up to World's AI in general being quicker and more fluid, more realistic, and not as rigid as the old World's monsters AI used to work like, but it definitely seems a lot less methodical and almost random sometimes. I want to quickly show you guys some old World end lag compared to Iceborne Rajang's end lag on some moves, just so I can reinforce. Alright, so Rajang doesn't leave a lot of openings for damage, that's all good. In classic Monster Hunter fashion, sometimes we have to create our own. We can still flinch him and knock him over, right? I'm sorry, I'm gonna be a little bit less professional here. What the f is this? You can already barely flinch this monster, and now you're telling me that if you flinch him and he has a wall to rebound off of, not only do you not get the flinch, but he can do an attack right after. So if you already started another attack and you're in an animation, you'll get punished for knocking him down. Now, I dig this concept. The fact that, you know, Rajang is such a tough motherfucker that you can't even truly keep him down is cool, it's badass. But it's such an intrusive concept to add to his fight. Especially when the fact that he is knocked down is gonna be one of the few times that you can do some good damage. I used to think it only happened when he was enraged, but it doesn't matter if whether he's enraged, rampage mode, or not enraged, it'll still happen. I think it only can't happen if he's tired. This new mechanic has pretty much forced hunters to avoid fighting him in certain areas that have a lot of walls or rocks you can rebound off of, so you pretty much want to try and relocate him if you can. If not, you just gotta deal with the fact that you might not be getting certain knockdowns. Again, it's a badass concept, but, you know, why? And then there's the Clutch Claw punish, which I'm sure was one of the first things all of us noticed when we fought him for the first time. If Rajang starts punching while you're in mid Clutch Claw, he will rip you off his shoulder. And you know, it's not even the fact that he stops your Clutch Claw, he also begins his pin animation. So it's like a punish for you, and then some. It doesn't matter how far along your Clutch Claw animation is, if he starts punching, he will pull you off. Sometimes you'll still get the damage off, but if your animation is really long, he could still grab you off. Unless of course you're trying to just yeet him to a wall, then if you're fast enough, you can get him. I gotta say though, again, the concept is badass. The fact that he just rips you off and is like, "What the fuck is that?" Now, why did I talk so much about these two things? Well, it's because these are the two main things that most players seem to dislike. It's just the fact of how everything culminates to make his fight worse. I personally wouldn't mind the wall rebound, but it's the fact that he has a lot less openings now, that we really need that knockdown, that makes that mechanic suck. Same thing with the Clutch Claw punish. It doesn't happen all the time, so I really wouldn't mind it, but it's the fact that his hit zones are so bad that we need to Clutch Claw that we end up putting ourselves in the situation. If we could just take, you know, one or two of these things out, then the fight would feel a lot better. But just everything added up together is what pretty much makes the fight not fun at times. This concept of being able to learn a monster's moves and get rewarded for actually learning it seems to kind of not associate with Rajang anymore, which sucks because he used to be one of the monsters that truly exemplified that concept. Here I have a clip of me breaking Rajang's horn and finally getting a knockdown. He's gonna do a rebound, but I know that he's gonna do it, so I get ready to do a clutch counter. So I'm sort of rewarded for knowing that he's gonna rebound and not immediately attacking, so I get myself hit. I'm able to successfully clutch counter, but because he starts punching right after, I get punished again and get thrown into a pin. As a player, it feels weird when you have knowledge of a monster, but you're not able to truly cash in on that knowledge. In this instance, I was punished for flinching him, and then I was punished again for countering his flinch counter. Now, I've been tearing into Iceborne Rajang quite a bit, so I do want to cut him some slack and talk about some things. I personally don't think Rajang sucks. There are monsters in World with worse fights than Rajang. He's not the worst monster. And there's one thing that I definitely have to say. Going off of how strong the hunters are in World, and all the tools at our disposal, do you think old Rajang would have even survived in this current Maw Center? Hell no. He would have gotten completely destroyed. If Rajang had his same old hitboxes, or better yet, if Rajang just stood there for a few seconds after most of his moves, this guy would get annihilated by the current state of the game. Are you kidding me? So I definitely understand some of the changes they made and why they made them. While the fight may not have been what I hoped it would be, they definitely delivered on the hype of Rajang. I feel like we've been gassing up Rajang for years, so those players who started with World were probably thinking like, alright, you know, how tough is this guy? And then boom, they dropped Iceborne Rajang, and he's just taking names all over, which is pretty awesome. It would have sucked if we just hyped him up for all this time and then, you know, he came out and everyone was just destroying him. So I do appreciate that. You cannot keep this guy down. He fights everything. He pretty much beats Joe, Savage Joe might I say, which is pretty cool. They were able to work in the Kirin lore in the most badass way possible. You can definitely see that a lot of passion and research went into making this version of Rajang, and we can't deny that this version of Rajang is gonna stick with us for some time, and it might even become more infamous than Apex Rajang in the long run. In summary guys, I think Iceborne Rajang is alright. I don't hate him, I don't think he's the worst fight in the game, and in my personal opinion, I think that old Rajang's fight was a lot better. And who knows, maybe it's for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's because the old, clunkier system of the game lended itself better to his fight, and the new, quicker, realistic AI is just something that doesn't work as smoothly for Rajang. I don't know, that's my opinion, but I have seen many people express something similar. And there's nothing wrong with a monster coming into World and feeling completely different, that's fine. I think it's just because of the contrast between Iceborne Rajang and the old Rajang fight that we knew that a lot of players feel this way. This way being that the fight is not as good or as fun as it used to be. In the end, I think both new and old Rajang are going to be liked or disliked for different reasons. And now, if you ever see someone saying that they hate the Rajang fight or they think that it sucks and you hear them comparing it to the old fight, I hope this video kind of helped you understand why some players might feel that way and that it isn't coming from nowhere. But he's not the only fight that came to the New World that feels pretty different, and perhaps I'll talk about them another time. I hope you guys enjoyed, thank you for watching, and happy hunting.